Hi guys, it's Miss Richardson. So in these videos I'm going to be talking you through how to write an essay, and I have a cute little helper. This is Dot. Dotty. Oh, she just wants to sleep. So she is my new puppy, and she is 11 weeks old, and so I thought she would bring a bit of cuteness to to these videos. Okay, so let's have a look. Oh, you want to say hi? Say hi. Okay. Okay, so let's have a look at these essays. Let's talk about how you start them. So this video is all going to be about how to start your essay. So let's have a look. The first thing you need to do, obviously, is to pick the right question for you, which means picking a question that not necessarily is the one with the easiest answer, but the one that you have the most to say about. That's really important, that you pick a question that you perhaps, instead of just going, yup, you know, that's the answer, then instead you kind of think, okay, well, I kind of agree, I kind of disagree, there's something to be said there. That's the question you want to pick, okay? For this, for the essay that I'm going to be writing with you in these videos, my essay question is going to be, only the animals presents the notion that suffering is inevitable, discuss. Okay, so that's what my question is going to be about in these videos. So once we've picked our question, then the next thing we need to do is to highlight key terms. So highlight words that we think are particularly important, particularly significant to our answer. So in this question, I think the important words are presents, suffering, and inevitable. Now, just for those of you who are playing at home, the word inevitable means that it's going to happen no matter what. Okay, inevitable means that you can't stop it, that it's going to happen anyway. So the question basically means that suffering is going to happen no matter what. Okay, so there are our key words. Now, the reason we want to kind of, I guess, keep our keywords in the front of our mind is because the keywords, what we want to do is use them pretty much in our intros, our topic sentences, our explanations, our link sentences, and our conclusions, okay? They are going to be used the whole way through. And yeah, okay, not necessarily those words in particular. We'll probably try and find synonyms for them sometimes, so that we don't sound like we're repeating ourselves. But yeah, that's why they're really important. Basically, by using these keywords, we can ensure that our examiner or our marker knows that we're answering the question, that we're waving to the examiner going, hi, I'm answering the question. See, because I'm using your words, so I must be answering it, okay? So let's move to the next bit. The next thing I need to do, so step 1 was pick the question. Step 2 is to kind of pull the question apart and find the keywords. Step 3 is to write out my contention. So basically your contention, just so if you've forgotten, your contention is basically what you think the answer to the question is. Okay, write it out as a statement using your keywords. Okay, the reason you would want to write it out using those keywords is to make sure that your answer has addressed them all. Okay, so here's my example. So my contention to the question that I had, which is only the animals presents the notion that suffering is inevitable. So my contention is, throughout the text, Dovey displays suffering and conflict as integral parts of existence, suggesting that it is ultimately unavoidable due to the cruel nature of lived experience. Dovey explores this notion by noting that whilst there is joy to be found in the bonds between humans and animals, their inevitable conclusion culminates in anguish. This is furthered by the link between conflict and suffering, asserted by the text, an idea ultimately supported by the inherent link between violence and cruelty with human nature, which causes both humans and animals to suffer. Okay, so mine's a little wordy, okay, but let's break down basically what I'm saying. So my answer is that suffering and conflict are both parts of our existence, that by being on earth, you are going to encounter suffering and you're going to encounter conflict. And that's because it's unavoidable. It's nature of what it's like to live in the world. Okay? And then the next bit is about humans and animals. And what I'm saying there about humans and animals is that, yes, there is joy to be found in the bonds between animals and humans, like this little one. There is joy to be found, but ultimately there is anguish, there is sadness, because, we will inevitably be separated from one another. The inevitable conclusion, as in, I don't want to say it, don't let her hear, that we will part from each other one day. And then the third kind of thing that I'm saying in this is that this is furthered by the link between conflict and suffering that asserted by the text, an idea that is ultimately supported by the inherent link between violence and cruelty in human nature. So the other thing that I'm saying is that, yes, suffering is inevitable because, unfortunately, humans are violent and cruel, and that's what we do. And so, yes, it is kind of inevitable that suffering will be present because humans, we like to be violent and we like to be cruel. So that's my answer, okay? Now, the reason I'm kind of showing you one that's kind of got a bit more fancy language in it is to show you that, how much, a bit of vocab tweaking can make ideas sing. That, I've got some really good ideas there, and by kind of just showing a little bit of pizzazz with the language, I can really kind of make the ideas sing. But I guess what I would really want to stress to you is that ideas come number one, yeah? If you're not quite ready to go the fancy language, that's okay, because frankly, I'd rather great ideas than fancy language. But if I can have great ideas and little bits of fancy language, I'm not going to say no. Just make sure that the language that you're using, the words that you're using, are being used accurately, because if they're not, it can feel really awkward, okay? So make sure that you're not just hitting that synonym button and assuming that the word works, because it doesn't always work, okay? All right, let's have a look at the next step. So step 4. Step 4, I need to plan my arguments and my evidence, okay? And the great thing is with your pieces is that you've got time to do this planning, okay? Because you get your planning and writing sessions. So take the time to actually plan out your piece before you just jump in, because you'll find that you'll come out with a better piece. I would never write an essay before I'd planned it, okay? And if I can't do it, then probably you can't either. Okay. Now, the great thing, I'll just flick back just to annoy you. The great thing about my contention is that, sorry, she's getting fussy. The great thing about the contention that I gave was that it has kind of 3 parts to it. Sorry, just need to move that. It has kind of 3 parts to it. It has the first part where I talk about suffering and conflict is kind of part of being a human being. And then I have my second idea where it's about, even though there is a lot of joy to be had by, relationships between humans and animals, ultimately, their inevitable conclusion leads to sadness. And then I've got a third idea there where it says, the reason why there is kind of inevitable suffering is because humans are a bit crap, that we like violence and we like cruelty. So I've got 3 kind of separate ideas there. So that would mean that I could actually take each one of these ideas and turn them into my arguments. So essentially what will happen is that my contention is ultimately my arguments, and I'm killing kind of 2 birds with 1 stone there. Sorry for horrible animal metaphors there, Dottie. I forgot to mention, yes, this is Dot. Her name is Dot. Oh, you can't see her. Look at her. Isn't she the cutest? I know. All right. Okay, so what I have done is I've taken the 3 ideas that I have, and I'm going to put each of them in their own paragraph. So the first paragraph is going to be about the emotional bond between humans and animals, and how the loss of this relationship is painful and therefore suffering is inevitable. Okay, and then what I've done is I've come up with some evidence. So I've got the connection between Fufu and her family in Soul of a Cat. And then I've got Himmler's connection with the dog in Hundstage. And then the separation of Colette and Kiki. You could also do Zafir and the camel, and how the camel misses Zafir. So we've got that one. The second argument that I'm going to do is as suffering is inherent to conflict, the anguish faced by those can't be avoided. So basically I'm saying, like, conflict is inevitable. Conflict is always going to happen. Therefore, suffering is always going to happen because conflict equals suffering. Okay? So with that, my evidence is going to be like both animals and humans are forced to be cruel to survive. So for instance, the dog eats the fox for sustenance, that, like, you know, you have to have conflict in order to survive, and that brings suffering. Kiki torturing or eating the birds, and the soldiers being forced to kill or engage in attacks. So I could either use, obviously, the soldiers in Soul of a Cat or in Hundstage. So I kind of got either there. Then my third paragraph, I'm going to do the cruelty and violence are inherent elements of human nature, that, you know, as human beings, we are cruel and we're violent. Not always, but, you know, that's kind of part of who we are. And therefore, suffering is inevitable because humans that's what we do. And so the evidence that I'm going to use there is how the people use the animals in war. So like the mules, and then, you know, in Hundstage where they strap the bombs onto the dogs. Don't listen, Dottie, I'd never do that to you. The soldiers, you know, they take delight in everyday cruelty in Soul of a Cat, the pigeon, the pony, the tomcat and I. And like how they want the cats to fight each other. You could also, you know, there's so many examples. So yeah, I would, in terms of how much, and this is actually something that will come up later, but a lot of people will kind of go, oh, how much evidence do I need to use? I kind of think that you should err on the side of caution, and rather than having loads of little bits of evidence, I think it often writes better if you choose 2 really great pieces of evidence per paragraph and that you explore them in depth. Rather than trying to give me 5, 6 different examples, give me 2 great examples and really drill down into them, talking about them in detail. And I'll look at that more in the next video. All right, not in the next video, in the evidence video. Okay, so hopefully you have kind of thought about your piece, you've sat down and you've worked out what your contention is, what your arguments are, what your evidence is going to be, and I'll see you in the next video to look at introductions. Bye.